By the time the 8 strangers reached Monroe House, dusk had already begun draining the color from the world. The mansion stood at the end of Bellwether Lane, behind a rusted iron fence, and a row of ancient oak trees whose branches leaned over the road like blackened fingers. It had been built in 1903, according to the brass plaque fastened to one of the gateposts. Though the years had not softened it, the house looked less like an abandoned relic than something deliberately holding its breath. 3 stories of gray timber and dark stone rose against the bruised evening sky. Narrow windows stared from the walls with dull black glass. A steep roof crowned the structure, its gables cutting into the clouds like broken teeth. Ivy crawled over the eastern wall in thick ropes, strangling the mortar and reaching toward the chimneys. There were no lights inside. Only 2 electric lanterns burned near the front steps, their imitation flames twitching in the wind. "This is perfect," Trevor Lang said. Trevor was 27, broad-shouldered, loud, and already recording the mansion with his phone. He turned the camera toward himself, grinning as the house loomed behind him. "Tell me this place doesn't look haunted." His girlfriend, Marissa Cole, pulled her coat tighter around her body. "It looks condemned." "That's what makes it haunted." "No, that's what makes it unsafe." Trevor laughed and turned his camera toward the others gathering near the gate. Richard and Ellen Shaw had been married for 36 years. They moved with the quiet coordination of 2 people, accustomed to matching each other's pace. Richard wore a small flashlight clipped to his belt. Ellen held the printed tour confirmation, folded neatly in her hand. "We're in the right place," she said. "The email says to meet at the mansion 30 minutes before the tour." Richard checked his watch. 8:25. The tour was scheduled to begin at 9. 4 more people joined them. Caleb Morton was a thin graduate student with round glasses, a messenger bag full of notebooks, spare batteries, and a handheld electromagnetic field detector. He introduced himself as a researcher of local folklore, though Trevor immediately called him a ghost hunter. Naomi Pierce had come alone. She was a nurse in her early 30s, who spoke quietly and watched the mansion with the careful expression of someone studying an injured patient. Her younger sister had bought the ticket for her birthday. Naomi admitted she did not believe in ghosts, but she had come because her sister had loved haunted places. Marcus Bell was a former Marine with a shaved head, a calm voice, and the habit of noticing every exit before anyone else entered a room. The last to arrive was Diane Kellerman, the nervous elementary school teacher who apologized twice for being late, even though she was still more than 20 minutes early. 8 people, 8 tickets, 8 strangers, standing before a locked gate while night gathered around Monroe House. Trevor filmed each of them, asking who believed they would see a ghost. Caleb said he hoped to document unexplained electromagnetic activity. Diane said she hoped not to see anything. Richard admitted Ellen had talked him into coming. Naomi shrugged. Marcus looked at the mansion for a long moment before answering. "I've seen enough real things to know I don't need imaginary ones." Trevor turned the camera toward Marissa. "What about you?" "I believe this will be cold, overpriced, and disappointing." A voice behind the gate said, "Disappointment is rarely the complaint people leave with." Everyone fell silent. A woman stood on the other side of the iron bars. None of them had seen her approach. She was tall and slender, dressed in a dark burgundy gown from another century. The high collar covered her throat. Black lace cuffs wrapped her wrists. Her pale hands were folded at her waist, and a small oval brooch rested beneath her chin. Her hair was pinned into an elaborate knot, though several dark strands hung loose around her face. She appeared to be in her early 30s, but there was something strangely ageless about her features. Her skin was smooth and colorless. Her eyes were deep-set and almost black in the fading light. She smiled. It was a polite, practiced expression. "Good evening," she said. "You must be my 9 o'clock guests." Trevor lowered his phone. "Are you the guide?" "I will be leading you through the house." Ellen unfolded the confirmation email. "It says our guide's name is James Larson." The woman's smile remained in place. "Mr. Larson has been delayed." "Will he be joining us?" Richard asked. "He may." Something about the answer caused Marcus to glance toward the empty road. The woman reached through the bars and unlocked the gate with a long iron key. The hinges groaned when she pulled it open. "My name is Jane," she said. "You are welcome inside." A gust of wind rushed through the trees, scattering dead leaves across the drive. Caleb adjusted his glasses. "Jane?" "Yes, Jane Monroe." The woman's eyes shifted toward him. For the first time, her expression changed. Only slightly. A tightening at the corners of her mouth. Trevor grinned. "She's staying in character, man." Caleb looked embarrassed. "Right, of course." Jane stepped aside. "Please remain together during the tour. Monroe House is larger inside than it appears." Trevor laughed. "That's a good line." Jane's gaze settled on him. It was not intended to be. They followed her through the gate. The gravel driveway curved between overgrown hedges toward the front steps. As they approached the mansion, the air seemed to grow colder. It was not the clean cold of autumn, but something damp and breathless, like air trapped inside a cellar for decades. Naomi noticed there were no security lights, no signs, no parked employee vehicles. Only the mansion, the imitation lanterns, and the woman walking ahead of them without making a sound on the gravel. At the top of the stairs, Jane produced another key. The front door was enormous, made of dark oak reinforced with black iron bands. A carved design spread across its surface. At first, Marissa thought it was a pattern of twisting vines. Then the lantern light shifted, and she realized the carving depicted animals intertwined by their necks. Birds, rabbits, dogs, a deer. Every head had been carved with its eyes closed. Jane inserted the key into the lock. "Before we enter," she said, "there are rules." Trevor lifted his phone again. "Here we go." Jane did not look at him. "Do not wander away from the group. Do not open any closed door unless instructed. Do not remove anything from the house. If you hear someone calling your name from another room, ignore it." Diane gave an uneasy laugh. "That happens?" "Sometimes." "What if it sounds like one of us?" Naomi asked. "It will." The laughter stopped. Jane turned the key. The lock made a heavy internal clunk. "And one final rule," she said. "Once the tour has begun, the front door must remain closed until the house is ready to release you." Richard frowned. "Until the house is ready?" Jane opened the door. A breath of cold, stale air moved across them. "Atmosphere," Trevor whispered to Marissa. "This is going to be good." They stepped inside. The entrance hall smelled of dust, old wood, and something sweetly rotten. A chandelier hung above the foyer, but none of its candles were lit. The only illumination came from wall sconces burning with weak amber bulbs. Their glow did not spread far. It clung to the wallpaper in small, sickly pools, leaving the corners untouched. The wallpaper had once been green. Moisture and age had darkened it to the color of pond water. Framed portraits lined the walls, their subjects painted in stiff, unsmiling poses. Jane closed the front door behind them. The latch clicked. A thick brass deadbolt slid into place by itself. Marcus stared at it. Remote mechanism? Jane began walking. Something like that. They entered a parlor where the furniture had been preserved beneath yellowing sheets. A grand piano sat against the far wall. Its black surface had cracked with age, exposing pale wood beneath like bone through burned skin. Jane stopped beside the fireplace. Monroe House was completed in the spring of 1903 by Arthur Monroe, a physician and industrialist. He lived here with his wife, Jane, and their daughter, Lillian. Caleb listened closely. Arthur Monroe was respected in public and feared in private, Jane continued. He believed illness was weakness. He demanded silence from his servants, obedience from his wife, and perfection from his child. What happened to him? Ellen asked. He died. Trevor smiled. That's usually what happens in haunted house stories. Jane looked at him. Yes. Her answer was flat enough to make his smile fade. She moved toward a portrait above the mantel. It showed a man with a severe face and silver mustache. Beside him stood a young woman in a white dress. A little girl sat between them, one hand resting on a small black dog. Arthur died in 1912, Jane said. His death was sudden. Caleb stepped closer to the portrait. Was it poisoning? Jane turned to him. What makes you ask? I read that arsenic was found in the plaster near his bedroom. Some historians thought Jane Monroe may have poisoned him. For several seconds the room was silent. Then Jane smiled. Historians enjoy inventing explanations for things that frighten them. She walked through an archway into the dining room. The group followed. A long table stretched beneath another chandelier. 9 high-backed chairs surrounded it. 8 chairs along the sides, 1 at the head. Place settings had been arranged on the table. Tarnished silverware, clouded glasses, porcelain plates, stained brown with age. Marissa stopped. Are these usually set like this? Jane stood behind the chair at the head. The servants prepared dinner every evening at 7, even after Arthur Monroe died. For whom? Diane asked. For the family? Caleb raised his detector. The screen flickered. It's spiking. Trevor leaned over his shoulder. What does that mean? Could be electrical wiring. There's barely any electricity in here. That doesn't mean there are no wires. The detector emitted a sharp electronic chirp. At the same moment, something struck the underside of the table. One hard knock. Everyone froze. Trevor crouched and looked beneath it. There was nothing there. A second knock sounded farther down, then a third. Each impact moved beneath the table toward Jane. Knock, knock, knock. The final blow came directly under the chair where she stood. Jane remained perfectly still. Who's doing that? Diane whispered. No one answered. Jane rested her fingers on the chair. Lillian Monroe hated family dinners. She would kick the table whenever her father discussed her failures. Caleb looked toward the portrait visible through the archway. How old was she? 8 when the house was built.
Like and subscribe.
17 when she disappeared. Disappeared? That is the kinder word. The chandelier trembled. Dust sifted from the ceiling. From somewhere on the second floor came the sound of a child running. Quick footsteps crossed the ceiling. They stopped directly above Naomi. A little girl laughed. The sound was so clear that Naomi's face went pale. Jane watched her. Did you hear her? Naomi nodded. What did she say? Jane asked. She didn't say anything. Jane's expression darkened. She will. Marcus stepped between them. Let's keep moving. Jane's eyes lingered on him before she turned away. The next rooms resembled a traditional ghost tour, a smoking room where Arthur Monroe was said to have collapsed, a library containing shelves of swollen, mold-spotted books, a conservatory where dried vines hung from the glass ceiling like veins. Jane told them about servants who vanished, animals found drained of blood, and guests who woke with bruises around their throats. At first, the group reacted as tourists were expected to react. Trevor made jokes. Ellen took photographs. Richard examined antique fixtures. Caleb recorded readings. But slowly, amusement gave way to unease. The house seemed to shift around them. Hallways felt longer when they looked back. Doors appeared where none had been before. A staircase they passed twice always seemed to lead in a different direction. The temperature continued to fall. Their breath became visible. In the library, Marissa found a photograph lying on a desk. It was black and white, faded around the edges. A group stood on the front steps of Monroe House. 8 people. 4 men, 4 women. Their clothing looked modern, though their faces had been scratched away. Marissa reached for it. Jane's hand closed around her wrist. Her fingers were so cold that pain shot through Marissa's arm. I said not to remove anything. I was only looking. Looking is often the first form of taking. Jane released her. A dark red mark encircled Marissa's wrist. Trevor stepped closer. You don't need to grab her. Jane looked at him. For one instant, the weak light seemed to dim inside her eyes. Trevor saw something move beneath her skin, a crawling darkness that crossed her cheek and vanished into her hairline. Then she smiled. My apologies. Trevor did not reply. Jane covered the photograph with one pale hand. Caleb stared at it. When was that taken? No one remembers. This paper isn't old. Jane's fingers slowly curled over the picture. Neither is the house. Before Caleb could ask what she meant, a door slammed somewhere nearby. Another door slammed. Then another. One after the other. Bang, bang, bang. The noise circled the library, moving through unseen rooms and approaching from every direction. Diane covered her ears. What's happening? The library doors swung shut. Marcus reached them first. He pulled the handles. Locked. The wall sconces went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Someone screamed. Trevor's phone light snapped on, followed by Marcus's flashlight and several others. Narrow beams cut across the shelves. Everybody stay where you are, Marcus said. I can't see, Ellen whispered. Richard found her hand. I've got you. A scratching sound came from inside the walls. Not rats. Too heavy, too deliberate. The sound moved behind the bookshelves, circling them. Marissa aimed her phone light toward Jane. She stood in the center of the room with her head tilted, listening. Is this part of the tour? Naomi asked. Jane did not answer. The scratching stopped. A voice whispered from inside the wall. Naomi. Naomi stiffened. It was a woman's voice, young, trembling. Naomi, please. Naomi backed away. No. The voice scratched at the plaster. Open it. Jane turned toward her. Who is it? Naomi stared at the wall. My sister. Your sister is not here, Marcus said. She died last year, Naomi whispered. The room seemed to tighten around them. Jane's eyes brightened. How did she die? Naomi shook her head. Don't answer her, Marcus said. The voice behind the wall began to cry. Naomi, it's dark. Naomi pressed both hands over her mouth. The crying grew louder. Please, I can't breathe. Naomi stepped toward the wall. Marcus caught her arm. That isn't your sister. The crying stopped. A different voice came from the wall, deeper, male. Marcus. Marcus went still. The voice spoke again. You left us. The muscles in his jaw tightened. Jane watched him with open fascination. "Who did you leave?" she asked. "Enough." The wall struck from the other side. A fist-shaped dent appeared in the plaster, then another, then dozens. Hands pounded from within the walls, surrounding them with a thunder of trapped violence. Diane screamed. Trevor shouted at Jane, "Open the doors!" Jane lifted one finger to her lips. The pounding stopped. Silence dropped so suddenly that their ears rang. Then the library doors opened. The wall sconces flickered back to life. Jane lowered her hand. "Monroe House has a talent for discovering grief." Marcus advanced toward her. "We're done." "The tour is not finished. It is for us. Unlock the front door." Jane looked almost disappointed. "You have not seen the third floor." "We don't want to." "You came here to be frightened." "We came here for entertainment." Jane's smile widened. "Are you not entertained?" No one answered. She walked through the open doors. "The safest route to the exit is ahead." Marcus did not move. Richard spoke quietly. "We don't know the way back." "We can retrace our steps," Trevor said. Caleb turned toward the hall behind them. The corridor ended at a blank wall. He swallowed. There was an archway there. Marissa stared at the wallpaper. "No, that's impossible." Jane waited at the far end of the opposite passage. "The house is larger inside than it appears," she reminded them. They followed because there was nowhere else to go. The corridor narrowed as they walked. The ceiling lowered and the walls pressed closer until they were forced into two uneven lines. Damp wallpaper brushed their shoulders. The air smelled stronger here. Sweet decay, iron, burned herbs. They reached the main staircase. It curved upward beneath a stained glass window depicting a field of white lilies. Moonlight filtered through, painting the steps in pale blue shapes. Jane climbed. They followed to the second floor. The upstairs hallway was colder than the rooms below. Portraits covered the walls from floor to ceiling, all of Jane Monroe at different ages. Jane as a young bride. Jane holding an infant. Jane dressed in mourning. Jane seated beside a hospital bed. Jane standing beneath the widow's walk. The strange thing was that she looked identical in every painting. Her clothes changed. The years printed on the brass nameplates changed. Her face did not. Caleb stopped. The records say Jane Monroe died in 1921. Jane continued walking. Records are written by people who require endings. Who painted these? People who believed they could save themselves. Trevor no longer recorded. At the far end of the hall, another staircase rose toward the third floor. This one had been blocked with red velvet ropes and two wooden barriers. A large white sign hung across the entrance. Restricted area. No public access. Tours must not continue beyond this point. Jane stopped beside it. "We will continue upstairs." Richard read the sign. "No, we won't." Jane looked back. "The most important room is on the third floor." "The sign says no tours," Ellen replied. "The sign is outdated." Marissa folded her arms. "It looks newer than anything else in this house." Jane's smile weakened. "It is part of the presentation." Caleb raised his flashlight toward the barrier. The wood had been secured with fresh bolts. A modern motion sensor had been installed above the stairs. Yellow caution tape was wrapped around the banister. "This isn't part of the presentation," he said. "This area is structurally restricted." Trevor nodded. "I'm not getting arrested for trespassing." "You will not be arrested," Jane said. "We're not going up there," Marcus told her. The hallway lights flickered. Jane's face went still. "You paid to see Monroe House. Not restricted areas. The third floor is the heart of the house." "Then we'll miss it," Naomi said. Jane looked at each of them. Something had changed in her expression. The pleasant guide remained, but only as a thin mask stretched over resentment. "There's nothing to fear upstairs," she said. Diane gave a nervous laugh. "Then why do you want us there so badly?" Jane's eyes moved to her. Diane's smile vanished. From above came the sound of a chair scraping across the floor, then another. 8 slow scrapes. Caleb stared upward. "What's up there?" Jane said. "A place prepared for you." Marcus stepped away from the stairs. "Everyone turn around." They obeyed. Behind them, the hallway had vanished. The portraits now stretched endlessly into darkness. No staircase, no doors, only a corridor narrowing to the width of a grave. Marissa's breathing quickened. "This can't be happening." "Don't panic," Marcus said. "The hall is gone. I can see that." "We need to go upstairs," Jane said. Trevor spun toward her. "No." The red ropes dropped to the floor. The barriers fell outward with 2 heavy crashes. The motion sensor above the staircase flashed green. Jane extended one pale hand. "Please." No one moved. For several seconds, she remained there with her hand outstretched. Then her fingers curled. The word "please" seemed to rot away from her face. The hallway lights went dark one by one. The nearest bulb died first, then the next, then the next. Each light extinguished closer to the group until only the lamp above Jane remained. She stood beneath it, her burgundy dress almost black. "I have been courteous," she said. Her voice had changed. It was lower now, layered with another voice beneath it, as though someone spoke through her from the bottom of a well. "I welcomed you into my home. I told you its history. I showed you its grief. I asked for nothing except your cooperation." Marcus lifted his flashlight. "We are leaving." Jane's head turned toward him with a soft crack. "No." The light above her exploded. Darkness rushed over them. Phone lights and flashlights snapped on. Jane was gone. Something crawled across the ceiling. They aimed their lights upward. A shape moved over the wallpaper on all fours. Dress hanging downward, black hair dragging along the wall. It traveled too quickly for a human body, limbs bending at wrong angles. Diane screamed. The thing dropped into the center of the group. Everyone scattered. Jane rose slowly from the floor. Her face had split from the corners of her mouth toward her ears. Behind the torn smile were rows of dark, narrow teeth. Her eyes were no longer human. They had become pits filled with slow-turning shadows. "You believe a rope makes sacred ground forbidden to me," she whispered. Her skin withered as they watched. Youth collapsed from her face like melting wax. Her cheeks hollowed. Her lips shriveled. The smooth hands became claws wrapped in parchment skin. "You believe a sign can protect you?" Her body bent backward. Bones snapped beneath her dress. When she straightened again, she appeared ancient. Older than the house, older than the land beneath it. Caleb stared at her. "Jane Monroe." She looked at him. "Yes." The portraits began whispering her name. "Jane, Jane, Jane." The sound traveled down the endless hallway. Caleb backed away. "The animals," he said. "You killed them." Her ruined smile widened. "They were practice." Ellen gripped Richard's arm. "What does she want?" Caleb looked toward the third-floor stairs. The story said she believed life could be transferred. That sacrifice could preserve youth. Jane's gaze moved across the group with hunger. "Life is heat," she said. "Breath, memory, time. Why should it be wasted on those who do not understand its value?" Trevor raised his phone. The camera flash burst. Jane recoiled with a shriek. Her outline flickered. For an instant, she became translucent. Marcus understood first. Keep the lights on her. Everyone aimed their flashlights and phones. Jane twisted away, raising one arm over her face. The shadows under her dress moved like insects. The portraits began screaming. Jane lunged. Marcus shoved Diane aside as Jane's claws sliced through his coat. He struck the floor hard but rolled, dragging his flashlight beam across her face. Her skin smoked beneath the light. "Move!" he shouted. They ran into the endless hallway. Jane's laughter followed them. The corridor stretched ahead, lined with portraits that turned their heads as the group passed. Painted mouths opened. Some called their names. Richard stumbled. Ellen pulled him upright. Trevor kept one hand around Marissa's wrist. Naomi held Diane by the shoulders, forcing her forward whenever panic slowed her steps. Caleb checked each door they passed. Locked. 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 Marcus brought up the rear, shining his flashlight behind them. Jane crawled along the ceiling. She moved in and out of the darkness, vanishing whenever the beam touched her. "This way," Caleb shouted. One door had opened. They rushed through and slammed it behind them. They were inside a child's bedroom. Faded blue wallpaper, narrow bed, a wardrobe, wooden toys arranged on a rug. "Lillian's room," Caleb whispered. The door shook as Jane struck it from the other side. Marcus dragged the wardrobe in front of it. Richard and Trevor helped. The impacts stopped. No one moved. Their breathing filled the room. Diane began to cry. "We're going to die." "No," Naomi said, though fear trembled in her voice. "We're not." Trevor checked his phone. "No signal." "Mine either," Marissa said. Ellen looked at Richard. "What time is it?" He checked his watch. 8:43. "That can't be right. We've been inside longer than 18 minutes. Every phone displayed the same time. 8:43 p.m. The second hand on Richard's watch twitched but did not move. Caleb searched the room. Old houses sometimes had servant passages. Trevor shone his light beneath the bed. A little girl stared back at him. He screamed and fell against the wall. The girl crawled slowly from beneath the frame. She wore a white nightdress. Her dark hair had been cut unevenly around her shoulders. Black bruises circled her throat. Naomi held up both hands. "Don't come closer." The girl looked at Jane's shadow moving beneath the bedroom door. "She cannot come in here," the child whispered. Caleb swallowed. "Lillian?" The girl nodded. A heavy strike shook the door. The wardrobe jumped forward an inch. "Why can't she enter?" Ellen asked. "My father locked her out." Another impact. The wood splintered near the handle. "Can you help us leave?" Marcus asked. Lillian pointed toward a smaller wardrobe against the opposite wall. "There's a door behind it." Trevor pulled it aside. A narrow wooden panel waited behind it. Caleb opened the latch. A black passage yawned beyond. The air flowing from it smelled like ashes. Lillian backed toward the bed. "Do not let her take you upstairs." "What is up there?" Diane asked. The child stared at her. Everyone she kept. The bedroom door cracked down the middle. Jane's fingers pushed through the split. Lillian screamed. Her body dissolved into a cloud of gray dust. "Go!" Marcus shouted. One by one, they squeezed into the hidden passage. Marcus entered last and pulled the panel shut. They descended a servant staircase, turning sideways to fit between the walls. Wooden beams pressed against their shoulders. Cobwebs clung to their faces. The passage was barely wide enough for one person. Behind them, something entered the shaft. Nails scraped wood. Jane whispered from above. "Marcus?" He ignored her. "You remember the burning vehicle?" His steps faltered. "You remember the men inside?" Keep moving, Naomi called from below. You heard them, Jane continued. You chose yourself. Marcus clenched his teeth. The scratching drew closer. Ahead, Ellen cried out. The group had stopped. What happened? Trevor asked. The stairs end, Ellen said. They had reached a brick wall, no door, no turn, a dead end. Panic surged through the passage. They could not reverse direction. They could not pass one another. Behind them, Jane crawled closer. Marcus pressed against the bricks. Look for a release, a latch, anything. Hands searched the wall. Caleb found a metal ring near the floor. He pulled. A section of brick swung inward. The group spilled into the kitchen. Marcus emerged last. A clawed hand reached through the opening and caught his ankle. He fell. Jane dragged him backward. Naomi and Trevor grabbed his arms. Marcus kicked into the passage. His boot struck something that felt like a face. Jane hissed. Her grip loosened. They pulled Marcus free and slammed the hidden door. A copper pot hanging above the stove crashed to the floor. Then every cabinet door opened. Inside each cabinet sat a glass jar. Hundreds of them. Some contained animal bones. Some held gray lumps of hair. Others appeared empty, though faint whispers came from within. Caleb approached one. A human tooth rested at the bottom. Don't touch anything, Marcus warned. A label had been attached to the glass. Margaret Hill. November 4th, 1913. Another read. Samuel Creed. May 19th, 1916. More names, more dates. The newest labels had been written with modern blue ink. Marissa found an empty jar at the end of the shelf. A fresh white label had been placed on it. Her full name was written in black ink. Marissa Cole. Beside it sat 7 more empty jars, one for each of them. Diane sank against the counter.
Subscribe.
She knew we were coming. No, Caleb whispered. He pointed toward the labels. The ink was still wet. She wrote them while we were here. All 8 jars began to tremble. From inside Marissa's jar came a faint sound. Her own voice. Trevor. Trevor backed away. The jar repeated his name. Then every jar spoke. Hundreds of voices filled the kitchen, calling names, begging, crying, praying. The noise grew into a deafening storm. Jane's face appeared in the dark kitchen window. Her eyes opened wider than human eyes should. The glass shattered inward. Marcus overturned a heavy table as Jane climbed through. Run. They fled into the pantry. The second servant door led into the dining room. The table was no longer set for 9. It was set for 8. At every plate sat a small object taken from one of them. Trevor's phone case, Marissa's scarf, Caleb's notebook, Naomi's silver bracelet, Marcus's military ring, Ellen's glasses, Richard's flashlight, Diane's house keys. None had noticed the objects being removed. Jane entered behind them. Her youth had returned. She looked beautiful again, almost radiant, but her shadow stretched across the floor in the shape of something bent and skeletal. I can make this painless, she said. Marcus grabbed a chair and threw it through the nearest window. The glass shattered. Beyond it was not the front lawn. The 3rd floor ritual chamber waited on the other side. 8 chairs stood in a circle. Symbols had been painted on the floor in dark stains. Candles burned around a stone table. Every chair faced the broken window. Jane smiled. The house wants you upstairs. Trevor seized another chair. Then the house can be disappointed. He swung at Jane. The chair passed through her body. Jane seized him by the throat. She lifted him from the floor. Marissa screamed and struck Jane with her phone light. The beam flashed across Jane's face. Her grip loosened. Trevor fell. Caleb grabbed 2 silver serving trays from a sideboard. Mirrors, he shouted. There are no mirrors anywhere in this house. He held the polished tray toward Jane. Her reflection appeared in the tarnished metal. It did not resemble the woman standing before them. The reflection showed a corpse with its mouth sewn shut and insects pouring from its eyes. Jane shrieked. The dining room lights flared. The front hall appeared beyond the archway. "The door!" Ellen shouted. They ran. The mansion groaned around them. Floorboards buckled. Walls cracked. The staircase twisted, its upper steps bending downward like a spine. Jane's voice thundered through the house. "You entered willingly." The front door stood at the end of the hall. Marcus reached it first. He turned the handle, locked. Richard tried the deadbolt. It would not move. "Break it," Trevor said. They rammed their shoulders against the door. Nothing. Behind them, darkness poured down the staircase. Not shadow, something thicker, a black tide filled with reaching hands and open mouths. Jane walked through it. Her gown trailed behind her like smoke. "You gave me your names," she said. The portraits repeated them. Trevor, Marissa, Caleb, Naomi, Marcus, Ellen, Richard, Diane. "You crossed my threshold. You followed me. You listened to my dead. The house has tasted you." Caleb looked toward the carved animals surrounding the lock. At the center stood a woman holding a key. "Jane locked the door," he said, "not the house." Marcus understood. The key. Jane's hand moved toward the pocket of her dress. Naomi rushed her. Jane had not expected it. Naomi collided with her body, and for 1 second Jane became solid. They struck the wall together. Naomi tore the iron key from Jane's pocket. Jane screamed. Her face transformed. Youth vanished. Skin split. Her jaw lengthened. Fingers tightened around Naomi's throat. Marcus drove his shoulder into Jane and knocked her aside. Naomi threw the key. Richard caught it. The black tide reached the bottom step. Hands crawled across the floor. Richard shoved the key into the lock. It would not turn. "What's wrong?" Ellen shouted. Jane rose behind Marcus. "The house is not ready." She drove her claws into his back. Marcus cried out but held her arms, keeping her away from the others. "Turn it!" Richard forced the key. Still nothing. Diane stared at the carved animals. Their eyes. Marissa looked at her. "What?" "Their eyes are closed." Diane placed both hands against the door. "Everybody close your eyes." Trevor stared at her. "What?" "The deadbolt moved when we weren't looking. The house does things when it isn't watched." The black hands reached their feet. "Close them!" Diane screamed. All 8 closed their eyes. Darkness became complete. Richard turned the key. The lock opened. The front door flew outward. Cold night air rushed over them. They opened their eyes and ran. They poured down the front steps, across the gravel, through the gate and into the road. Behind them, the mansion roared. Every window filled with faces, men, women, children, animals, all pressed against the glass. Jane stood in the doorway. Her body flickered between young woman and ancient corpse. She could not cross the threshold. Naomi supported Marcus as they staggered toward the parking area. His coat was torn, but the wounds beneath it had begun to close, leaving only 3 dark lines across his back. Ellen sobbed against Richard's chest. Diane sank onto the grass. Trevor wrapped both arms around Marissa. Caleb stood in the road, staring at Monroe House. The front door slowly closed. Jane's pale hand remained visible until the final inch. Then it vanished. The door slammed. Silence settled over Bellwether Lane. For several moments, no one spoke. Trevor checked his phone. 8:55 p.m. Only 30 minutes had passed since Jane opened the gate. Headlights turned on to Bellwether Lane. A dark van approached and stopped across from the mansion. A man jumped out. He wore black trousers and a black collared shirt embroidered with a silver Ghost Tour logo. A radio was clipped to his belt. He looked flustered and angry. "Hey!" he shouted. "Buddy!" The group turned toward him. He hurried across the road. "What are you doing over here?" No one answered. He looked from their pale faces to the open iron gate. "I told everyone in the confirmation email to wait in the parking area until the guide arrived." Richard stared at him. "Who are you?" "James Larson, your tour guide." Ellen made a broken sound in her throat. James checked his watch. "I'm 5 minutes late. 5 minutes. That doesn't give you the right to enter a privately owned building without a guide." Naomi stepped toward him. "We had a guide." James stopped. "No, you didn't." "A woman let us inside," Trevor said. "She had keys." The irritation vanished from James's face. "What woman?" Caleb answered. "Jane Monroe." James became completely still. His eyes moved toward the mansion. "You need to leave," he said. "We nearly died in there," Marissa snapped. James lowered his voice. "You need to get in your cars and leave now." Marcus studied him. "You know what's in that house." James looked at the 8 of them. "Monroe House has been closed for interior tours since 1997. No one spoke. "The official tour doesn't go inside," he continued. "We walk the grounds. We discuss the architecture and the disappearances, that's all." Caleb's face had gone gray. "What happened in 1997? 3 teenagers broke in. 1 came out. He never spoke again." "The 3rd floor?" Diane asked. James looked at her. "What about it?" "There's a restricted staircase." James's eyes narrowed. "There is no 3rd floor staircase." They all stared at him. "It was sealed behind a brick wall after the fire in 1921. Naomi looked down at her wrist. The silver bracelet her sister had given her was gone. Her fingers touched the bare skin. Through the trees, one upstairs window glowed. A woman stood behind the glass. Jane lifted one pale hand. The bracelet dangled from her fingers. Naomi stopped breathing. James turned toward the mansion, but the light went out before he saw anything. Police arrived 20 minutes later. The 8 survivors told the same story separately. They described the rooms, the portraits, the blocked staircase, the jars, the dining table, the child named Lillian. The officers searched the mansion with James and the property manager. They found a decaying entrance hall, 3 collapsed rooms, and a staircase that ended at the 2nd floor. There was no library, no ritual chamber, no jars, no sign that anyone had entered the house in years. The objects taken from the group were never found. By sunrise, the officers had decided panic, trespassing, and environmental exposure had created a shared delusion. The survivors knew better. For 3 days, nothing happened. On the 4th night, Trevor uploaded part of his footage. The video was only 17 seconds long. It showed the group standing outside Monroe House before Jane opened the gate. Trevor had titled it, "The Guide Who Wasn't There." The video received thousands of views within hours. Most people accused him of staging it. A few slowed the footage down. At the 5-second mark, Jane could be seen behind Trevor standing inside the locked gate. At the 11-second mark, she was closer. At the 16-second mark, she stood directly behind him, though Trevor had not reacted.
Like and subscribe.
The following morning, Marissa found his apartment door open. The lights were on. His wallet and car keys sat on the kitchen counter. His phone lay on the floor beside the front door. There were wet footprints across the carpet. They began at the hallway mirror and ended in Trevor's bedroom. Trevor was gone. The police found no sign of forced entry. At 8:43 that evening, Marissa received a video from his phone. The recording showed a dark staircase. Trevor's breathing came through the speaker. A woman whispered, "Almost there." The video ended before he reached the top. Marissa called the others. They met the following night at Richard and Ellen's home. James Larson came too. He looked exhausted and older than he had outside the mansion. "This has happened before," he admitted. Caleb leaned forward. "How many times?" James stared at the table. "Not 8 at once." "Tell us everything," Marcus said. James explained that stories about Jane Monroe had circulated for decades. Tourists sometimes reported seeing a woman at the gate before the guide arrived. Most refused to follow her. Some claimed she vanished when approached. A few entered the mansion. Those people usually returned confused, missing personal belongings, and unable to remember what happened. "Usually," Marissa asked. James said nothing. Naomi's voice trembled. "What happened to the others?" "Some disappeared within weeks." Silence settled over the room. Caleb opened his notebook. "She marks people by taking something personal." James nodded. "That's what I believe." "Then she can reach us through those objects." "Maybe?" "Not maybe," Marissa said. "Trevor is gone." Caleb began researching Jane obsessively. He found newspaper clippings about pets vanishing from the neighborhoods surrounding Monroe House. He found medical journals written by Arthur Monroe describing his wife's fear of aging. He found references to a private society that believed memory could be separated from the body and transferred through blood. The final article he uncovered had been written in 1921. Police entered the 3rd floor after neighbors reported smoke. They found a circular room containing 8 chairs and hundreds of glass jars. 7 bodies were seated upright. Jane Monroe lay in the center of the floor. Her body was described as unusually preserved. The article did not mention an 8th victim. Caleb called Naomi just after midnight. "I figured it out," he whispered. "What?" "She doesn't take them inside the house." "Caleb, slow down. That's why she let us leave." Naomi felt cold spread through her body. "What do you mean?" "The escape was part of the ritual. We had to believe we got away. We had to cross the threshold carrying fear back into the world." A scraping sound came through Caleb's phone. "Where are you?" Naomi asked. "At the university archive." "Are you alone?" Caleb did not answer. The scraping came again. A chair being dragged across wood. Then Jane spoke close to the receiver. "Mr. Morton has completed his research." The call ended. Campus security found Caleb's messenger bag in the locked archive room. His glasses rested on an open newspaper. Across the article about Jane Monroe, someone had written a single sentence in black ink. "The 8th chair is no longer empty." After Caleb disappeared, the group stopped sleeping. Diane heard children whispering in her classroom after dark. She began leaving work before sunset, but the voices followed her home. Every night at 8:43, her missing house keys rattled inside the front door lock. The first night she called the police. The second night she placed a chair beneath the doorknob. On the 3rd night, she heard Jane on the other side. "You were always the most obedient." Diane moved into her sister's home. For 6 days, nothing happened. On the 7th morning, her sister found Diane's bed empty. The blankets had been folded neatly. A trail of dark soil led from the bedroom to the closet. Inside, the back wall was covered in green wallpaper, the same pond-colored wallpaper from Monroe House. In the center of it stood a narrow wooden door. By the time police arrived, the door was gone. Marcus attempted to fight what was happening. He installed cameras throughout his home. He kept every light on. He slept with a flashlight in his hand. Each morning, the scratches across his back had deepened. They no longer looked like wounds. They looked like handwriting. On the 9th morning, Naomi photographed the marks. The words were clear. "Come upstairs." Marcus refused to wait. He called James and told him he was going back to Monroe House. James tried to stop him. "Returning is what she wants. She already has us." "Not completely." Marcus looked at the words carved into his skin. "I'm not waiting for her to take me in my sleep." He drove to Bellwether Lane alone. His vehicle was found outside the locked gate the next morning. The driver's door was open. His flashlight lay in the gravel, still burning. Security footage from a nearby traffic camera showed Marcus arriving at 8:38 p.m. At 8:43, he stepped out of the vehicle and walked toward the house. He was not alone. 7 shadowy figures walked beside him. Trevor, Caleb, Diane, and 4 shapes no one could identify. Richard and Ellen disappeared together. For weeks, they had slept in the same room with the lights on. Ellen kept hold of Richard's hand every night because she feared waking alone. One morning, their daughter arrived to check on them. The front door was unlocked. Breakfast sat untouched on the table. Their bedroom was empty. The bed had not been slept in. Their missing objects were arranged on the pillows. Ellen's glasses, Richard's flashlight. Both were covered in fresh dust. On the bedroom wall hung a portrait that had never been there before. It showed Richard and Ellen seated beside each other in old-fashioned clothing. Their painted faces were young. Their eyes were closed. Only Marissa and Naomi remained. They began staying in the same apartment. Neither wanted to be alone. James visited daily, bringing files, police reports, and old maps of the property. Guilt had hollowed his face. "If I had been on time," he said one night, "none of you would have entered." Marissa looked toward the dark window. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Naomi shook her head. "Jane chose us before we arrived. Our names were already on the jars." James's expression changed. "What jars?" They had told police about them, but James had never heard that part in detail. Naomi described the kitchen, the hundreds of containers, the labels. James opened an old floor plan of Monroe House. There was never a kitchen on that side of the building. Marissa gave a humorless laugh. "Of course there wasn't." James studied the blueprint. "The room you described would be directly beneath the sealed third-floor chamber." At 8:43, every light in the apartment went out. Naomi and Marissa froze. From the hallway came the slow rustle of fabric, a woman's dress moving across the floor. James turned on his flashlight. The beam revealed the missing silver bracelet lying in the center of the hallway. Naomi stared at it. "No." Jane's voice came from the bedroom. "You left something behind." The bedroom door opened by itself. Beyond it was not the bedroom. A narrow staircase climbed into darkness. 8 chairs scraped across the floor above. James pulled Naomi away from the doorway. "Don't touch the bracelet." Marissa began crying. "She has Trevor." A man's voice whispered from upstairs. "Marissa." She stepped forward. Naomi caught her. "That isn't him." "Please," Trevor called. "She hurt me." Marissa struggled against Naomi. "Trevor!" A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Trevor stood in the darkness. His face was pale. His eyes remained closed. Jane's hands rested on his shoulders. "He has been waiting for you," she said. James raised the flashlight. Jane recoiled. The stairway flickered. For 1 second, Naomi saw the ordinary bedroom again. Then Jane smiled. Light only helps when you still know where you are. The apartment walls changed. Green wallpaper spread across them like mold. Portraits appeared along the hallway. Trevor, Caleb, Diane, Marcus, Richard, Ellen, all seated with their eyes closed. 2 empty frames waited at the end. One labeled Marissa Cole, the other labeled Naomi Pierce. Marissa broke free. She ran toward Trevor. Naomi caught only the sleeve of her shirt. The fabric tore. Marissa reached the first stair. The doorway slammed shut. The apartment returned. Marissa was gone. Her scarf lay on the floor. Naomi screamed until her voice failed. After that night, she stopped running. She understood that distance did not matter. The house had already crossed the threshold with them. It lived in mirrors, dark hallways, and the moment before sleep. Jane had not needed to trap them inside Monroe House. She only needed to teach them how to find their way back. Naomi and James spent the next 2 days preparing. They gathered every photograph, report, and diary connected to Jane. They found references to the ritual in Arthur Monroe's private papers. The sacrifice required 3 stages: invitation, departure, return. The victim had to enter willingly. The victim had to leave carrying fear. Then the victim had to return after hearing the call. James read the passage 3 times. She can't complete it if you don't return. Naomi looked at the photographs of the others. They didn't return willingly. They followed voices, memories, grief. She manipulated them. That still counted. James said nothing. Naomi picked up the photograph of her sister. Jane had used her voice in the library. Sooner or later, she would use it again. There's one thing she didn't expect, Naomi said. What? That someone would return knowing exactly what she wanted. James tried to stop her. She refused. At 8:30 the following evening, they drove to Bellwether Lane. Rain had begun falling. Monroe House stood beyond the fence, dark and enormous, beneath the clouds. The gate was locked. James cut the chain. They entered together. The front door opened before they reached the steps. Warm amber light filled the entrance hall. Jane stood inside wearing her burgundy gown. She looked young again, beautiful, patient. You are early, she said. Naomi stepped across the threshold. James followed. The door closed behind them. This time the mansion did not pretend to be ordinary. The walls breathed. Faces moved beneath the wallpaper. The floorboards flexed under their weight like ribs. Every portrait showed one of the missing guests. Jane turned toward the staircase. The others are waiting. Naomi did not move. You took my bracelet. Jane touched the silver chain around her wrist. You carried your sister's grief inside it. Such devotion should not be wasted. You used it to reach me. I used what you gave me. I never gave you anything. Jane smiled. You entered my home. The second-floor hallway appeared above them. At its end, the once blocked staircase to the 3rd floor stood open. No barriers, no caution tape, only darkness. Jane began climbing. Naomi followed. James stayed beside her. As they reached the 3rd floor, the smell of burned herbs and old blood grew stronger. The ritual room waited beyond a burgundy door. Inside, 8 chairs formed a circle around a stone table. 7 were occupied: Trevor, Caleb, Diane, Marcus, Richard, Ellen, Marissa. They sat upright with their eyes closed. Their skin was warm. Their chests rose and fell faintly. They were not dead, but they were no longer fully alive. An 8th chair waited for Naomi. A 9th stood near the wall. James stared at it. I wasn't part of the group. Jane looked at him. You opened the gate. I arrived late. You brought them to me. His face drained of color. No, guilt is also an invitation. Naomi walked toward the stone table. Glass jars surrounded it. Inside each jar, a pale light pulsed like a heartbeat. 7 glowed brightly. The jar bearing Naomi's name remained empty. She understood. Their souls aren't in the chairs. Jane's smile faded slightly. Naomi picked up Trevor's jar. Jane's face changed. Put that down. The room trembled. James lifted a silver tray he had carried beneath his coat. He turned it toward Jane. Her true reflection appeared. A corpse with a sewn mouth, hollow eyes, a body crowded with the shadows of everything she had taken. Jane screamed. Naomi threw Trevor's jar onto the floor. It shattered. A burst of light filled the room. Trevor's eyes opened. He gasped violently. Jane lunged. James kept the tray raised. Her skin smoked under the reflected image. Naomi smashed Caleb's jar, then Diane's, Marcus's, Richard's, Ellen's, Marissa's, each shattered with a sound like a breath released after years underwater. The survivors woke screaming. The room convulsed. Cracks split the walls. The ceiling sagged. Jane's youthful form flickered and collapsed. "You belong to me," she shrieked. "No," Naomi said. "You only kept pieces." Jane rushed toward her. James stepped between them. Jane struck him. Her claws entered his chest. He fell against the stone table. The silver tray clattered away. Jane's true face vanished. Her beauty returned. She seized Naomi by the throat and dragged her toward the empty chair. The others were still weak, barely able to stand. Naomi reached for the bracelet on Jane's wrist. Jane tightened her grip. "You came willingly." Naomi tore the bracelet free. "And I'm leaving the same way." She wrapped the chain around the final empty jar bearing her name and smashed it against the stone table. The jar had appeared empty. It was not. A black vapor erupted from within. Jane screamed. Her body cracked from head to toe. The souls she had taken poured through those fractures in streams of white light. Animal cries filled the room. Children wept. Men and women gasped. The walls bulged outward. Thousands of hands pressed through the wallpaper, reaching for Jane. She fought them. She clawed at the floor. She begged. Then the hands pulled her backward into the wall. Her body flattened beneath the paper. For one final instant, her face remained visible, young on one side, ancient on the other. Then the wall closed over her. The house began collapsing. Naomi pulled James to his feet. Blood darkened his shirt, but he was conscious. Together, the group stumbled down the stairs. The mansion twisted around them, attempting to close corridors and seal doors. But without Jane, the changes were weak and incomplete. They reached the foyer. The carved animals on the front door opened their eyes. The door unlocked. All 9 escaped into the rain. Behind them, Monroe House groaned. The 3rd floor folded inward. Windows burst. The roof collapsed through the center of the building. By the time firefighters arrived, the mansion had become a smoking shell. The missing guests were taken to the hospital. Doctors could not explain their condition. Although weeks had passed, none showed signs of dehydration or starvation. Each believed they had been trapped for only a few minutes. James survived. The wound in his chest healed into 4 pale scars. Monroe House was demolished the following spring. Workers found no ritual room, no chairs, no jars, no human remains. Only a single burgundy door buried beneath the foundation. It had no hinges, no handle. On its surface were hundreds of names. Some had been carved more than a century earlier. Others were fresh. The names of Trevor, Marissa, Caleb, Naomi, Marcus, Ellen, Richard, Diane, and James had been crossed out. At the bottom of the door, beneath them all, someone had written one final message. Tours resume in October. The door was destroyed. The land was paved. A medical office was built where Monroe House had once stood. For a while, the survivors tried to remain close. They met every month, then every few months. Eventually, life began pulling them apart. Trevor never uploaded the rest of his footage. Marissa stopped visiting historic homes. Caleb abandoned his research into the paranormal. Diane moved to another state. Richard and Ellen kept every light in their house on after sunset. Marcus never again entered a room without checking the ceiling. Naomi locked the silver bracelet in a bank deposit box. James resigned from the tour company. They survived. That was what they told themselves. Years later, on the final night of October, Naomi received an email from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "Your reservation is confirmed." She opened it. The message contained no text, only a photograph. A different mansion, a woman, young, beautiful, smiling. At the bottom of the image was a time, and 9 p.m. Guests were advised to arrive 30 minutes early. Naomi deleted the email. Then she called James. He answered on the first ring. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, James said, "You saw it too." Naomi slowly turned toward the dark window beside her. Her own reflection stared back. Standing just behind it was a woman in a burgundy dress, pale, motionless, smiling. Jane Monroe slowly raised one hand in greeting. Naomi didn't turn around. She already knew no one was standing behind her. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the reflection was gone. James whispered, "Naomi?" She never answered. Somewhere in another town, another mansion waited beneath a moonless sky. 8 strangers gathered outside its gates, arriving 30 minutes early for a ghost tour. A woman in a burgundy dress unlocked the gate, smiled warmly, and said, "Good evening. You must be my 9 o'clock guests."
Like and subscribe.